Welcome, dear listeners, to the Speak and Flow podcast, where we dive into strategies, unique stories to help you and your team achieve maximum potential and flow. Today, I have an amazing leader. She's an HR director, and she's also director of staff development. Her name is Renesha Westerfield. Hi, Renesha.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to dive all into vulnerability, what it means, and give you strategies, tips to lead with vulnerability, which is courageous. But what does it mean, anyways? And to kick us off, I'm going to have Renesha tell us what brought you here today, and what was your reason for being on this podcast? Because it ties into this theme.
Yes, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Yes, so vulnerability led me right here. I know it's a fear of mine, has historically been, to be open, to tell people about the things I've experienced, or to show sadness, anger, or other emotions that make others feel uncomfortable. And instead of that being my story, I want to change that. I want to break that chain of, what I've been taught as a young girl, to not share those parts of myself and open it up. And I've been working on that in my job currently. And it's probably the hardest thing I've done outside of, being a mother, but it is paying back in dividends for sure. So I definitely wanted to take another opportunity, or my first rather, to talk about this further.
Yeah, and so what do you think that was doing within you when you weren't being like open to all the sides of you, the parts of you? What was that doing internally?
I think it was, slowly, killing me, I think, not in a physical way, right? But I think all the barriers, much like, buildings block the light, right? The light couldn't get into those deeper parts of me that needed it, that
Yeah.
needed to be held and seen and spoken to. It was easy with, putting up a mask and reflecting what I think you wanted to hear or what you wanted to know versus what was going on within me. And I think it set a message that I who I am didn't deserve to be seen or heard. And that's very much not the case, right? People want to know about me just as much as I want to know about them. And I was robbing people of that opportunity by, keeping that within myself.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I really appreciate you. Thank you for your courage to be here to share this story. And I'm curious, you being an HR leader for many years, like how do you see this within teams, within employees, like them not feeling that they can really open up and not feeling that they're able to be vulnerable in the workplace? How does that look? And have you seen that?
Right. I mean, we all heard the saying that it's just work. You can't be who you are. You're there to get a check and go home.
Right.
And while to some extent that is true, right, you are hired to do a job and you have to complete the task. I think that nowadays, it's kind of impossible to not bring your full self, as if you're not impacted by life events, by the world events, right? We have so much going on and we spend so much time at work, but then we're not to share ourselves. That doesn't make sense. So you are going to have moments where you're going to be vulnerable. Those in the HR world know, right? We are there for your wonderful moments. You're
Yeah.
welcoming a baby. You adopted a baby, you're getting married, all these wonderful things, and
Right.
also the hard things, divorces, deaths in the family. So we know more than most parts of the organization or business that
Right.
life is there. So I think for an HR leader to be effective, I have to be vulnerable in order to help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that. I think it changed over time. But when I first got this position, I said, this is the leader I want to be and the leader I wish I had. So
Mm-hmm.
I never had this modeled for me, but I wanted so much to just be able to bring a little bit vulnerability into these tough conversations with the hope that it would transform and, lead to change, right? It's a gamble. I would say day to day, right? I don't know what I'm going to get. And, that's where therapy has helped me understand that even if I'm bringing my vulnerable self and that's rejected, or that leads to a difficult conversation, that they don't have the power to define who I am or
Right.
rejects me in that moment.
Right.
That it's still
Right.
okay to be vulnerable, because that's the work that I'm working within myself to bring that out. But there's no definition there, right? There's no validation that another person can give me, because
Right.
I'm enough in that moment.
I
So
love that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And I want to come back to that. I want to hold on to that. Like you said, being vulnerable doesn't mean that we still want or expect or other people their reaction. It's still, you're doing it also because it's enough.
Mhm.
Their reaction is going to be their reaction, but let's get back to that, because I think
Yeah,
there's so much to unpack there. I
sure.
kind of want to go back to like understanding. So when people and the teams are not vulnerable, how can a leader like find out? I mean, because people can put on a face, a show,
True, true,
a
true.
leader would never know if there's a lot in there or a lot that people are not
Right.
discussing or disclosing. So, and maybe do we just gloss over it? If they don't bring it up, should we not even go
Right.
there?
I think that does happen, right? A lot of us
Right.
are avoiding it on all ends. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
say it, I didn't hear it. But the problems are becoming more complex in the workplace. So I do think that I like to provide examples of things that I have been through as ways to kind of help someone meet me halfway, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I can't make them. But I do think that demonstrating, like, hey, this thing happened to me too. I remember when I was at work, I
Right.
too have been, you know, the only woman in a situation, or the only Black person in the situation, and this is how I navigated it. This is what I felt in the moment. Um, but keeping it very past tense and boundaried, in the sense that they don't need every gory detail, but, and I'm not pushing myself past my emotional checkpoints,
Mhm.
that I feel that, you know, what I'm giving you, I would tell anybody. I'm confident in that. I've healed from it, but there's still something to gain from it, even in sharing that story with somebody. Um,
Right.
and when someone sees a leader say that, it does change the way that they're responding to you. I've seen that look on their face. The shoulders will drop, they'll take a sigh, and, you know, well, yeah, that, you know, then you get the truth from the situation. Sometimes it's not a guarantee that, you know, someone's at that place that they're ready to show up in that way. But, you know, sometimes you got to keep coming around to certain people,
Mhm.
and keep showing them, like, I'm still this vulnerable person in this setting, in different settings. The consistency is super important, so it
Right.
doesn't feel manipulative or dangerous or unsafe.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. So opening up ourselves first as leaders
yeah,
to be vulnerable, model the way, share
definitely.
examples, share stories and experiences. And
Right.
I love what you said, like share the stories when you're like almost healed and
Mhm.
able to see the
Right.
ways versus
Yes.
not
Yeah.
really thinking through the story as much and sharing from a place of just vomiting or because we're upset and
Right.
especially as
Right.
a leader.
Right. It can kind of
Um,
take over the conversation.
yeah,
The dynamic's already there, right? You're the leader. Maybe they're, you know, a frontline staff, or, you know, not at your equal level. And that sometimes can intimidate people if you put too much in it. But,
right.
you know, I would look at it like just the toe, you know, get a
Yeah,
temperature check, you know, let people
yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so going back to the idea of um when is enough, or what were we talking about earlier? Um I was going to come back to it. But the
Yeah.
benefits, these are the benefits of
Yeah.
storytelling and what that
Yeah.
does to the teams, what that does to, what is a reason to be vulnerable?
Oh, yes. You know, obviously, I'm speaking from my perspective as
Uh,
someone who has had to heal from a lot of trauma. Um, it becomes who you are in a way that you don't want that to define who you are. In being vulnerable, I've been able to get a grasp on it in a way that it does not break me down. It just added to all the wonderful things that make me who I am.
Wow.
Um, right. But also not this thing I need to talk about constantly. It isn't something that has to be centered in every conversation, but I have some place to draw from. It almost becomes this well of abundant situations and circumstances that lead you to where you are. And every now and then I got to get a cup, and I get to share this cup of my experiences with someone. And much like breaking bread, or going out
Yeah,
for
yeah,
drinks
yeah.
with somebody, you get to just enjoy that. Like, we had this time, you remember this, and yeah, we learned from that. Or you cry sometimes. It just depends on where you are, you know, in your circumstance. But so much of that used to be this like vault. You don't open it, it's nasty, it's dark. Now it's like, no, that happened and it's okay.
Yeah.
And it'll build bridges with people, right? And I have more in common with folks. I've realized in my bonus. I'm like, I didn't realize I had a shared experience with someone who doesn't look like me, who's not from where I'm from. Who knew we had that in common, right? So it
Right.
reassures and validates this thing inside of myself of you did a thing, you took a step for
Yes.
you, and
Yes.
and someone else poured into that cup with you. It
Yes.
was not this siloed experience. So it's like I'm
Yes.
opening up, growing.
Oh.
I feel like a new person. I never thought I'd be able to say this about vulnerability, because if you ask me or any of my therapists, they would have the opposite to say. But it is transformative, to say the least.
Oh, I'm so proud. I'm so excited for you. I mean, welcome. I mean, this is amazing. The power of vulnerability and opening it up. I think that what you said is so key. It's like a lot of times we don't want to take that step because we're afraid of what people are going to think. We're afraid we
Right,
don't know if we can share all these things, but then, there's different reasons to share ourselves. Sometimes
right,
sharing an experience because we have the answer, but then like you said, sometimes we don't have the answer, and that's okay. And that reminded me of my story, of an experience I had, and I think moms can relate and fathers, but I had my daughter came home, she was so upset, and at that moment, I had no answer for her. I
right.
literally, I don't know what I can do for you, but I just held her, and it was
Yes,
a bonding experience. I just
yes.
remember holding her, and I realized, like, I was like, that's the answer.
Mhm.
Is this moment of bonding that I
Yeah,
can cry with you and connect
yes,
with you, even if you look different from me, even if you come with different cultures, different backgrounds, like whatever. But sometimes just sharing that experience, breaking bread
yes.
with somebody, and then getting in touch with those feelings that we all have as humans is the
Yeah,
answer.
totally. It
I know.
humanizes you, right?
It's
You forget, right?
humanizing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a parent, you forget what it was like to be a teen. You forget what
Yeah.
it's like to go through the emotional turmoil. Same with becoming leaders. We forget what being frontline is like, what it's
Yeah.
like to manage for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
All those memories we kind of stuffed away.
Right.
Being vulnerable allows you to bring them up with hindsight, with healing, with
Mm-hmm.
your takeaways, and the wisdom in that is very powerful. And I think wisdom and vulnerability kind of go hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Right.
think the wise people we know aren't vulnerable, right?
Right.
They're sharing these things that they went through and saying, this is what I learned from it, right? So yeah, it's just a wonderful place to be in, for sure.
And how are you doing this at work? Are you there specific things, steps that you do, and what are yeah, can you share some of those?
Sure. I mean, as far as at work, it starts with my team. As
Okay.
HR, we're everywhere. You might talk to
Yeah.
someone in payroll and benefits and recruitment. And so I lead by example, for sure. I am big about, let's let it all out.
Yeah.
Say what you got to say, dump
Really?
it out. Yeah, dump it out. That's okay. Cone of silence,
Do
put
you
the
do
cone
like
of
a
silence.
time frame? Like is there
Yeah, we have our set check-ins, right? Or if
uh,
something comes up, I make time. But I try to give them the space to say it all. I'm not going to judge you. I
yes.
understand this is hard and you're
Oh,
angry, because you don't get to show that to the staff. You
yeah.
don't get to bring attitude. You don't get to shut them down. They're coming to us for resources.
Right.
So you got to dump that off someplace
Right.
else so that you can get back in and do your best.
Right.
So it becomes like a workshop. You
Right.
yell, you throw it out the wall, and I'm like, okay, I think I can fix this. I think we can address this. Here are some pointers. Here's something I would do. Or there's some things that come up that they shouldn't have been in charge of, and I'll step in, because sometimes those situations can become tenuous, and I don't want that for my staff. But I do provide feedback after I've done something. I'm like, this happened to me. Here's what how I felt, and here's how I handled it.
Uh,
If this comes up, here's some takeaways.
uh-huh.
Outside of my team, right? Obviously, I deal with staff outside of my team. Um, I do open a conversation. Are we venting, or is this something that I need to get my pad and my pen out for? And they said, oh, okay, well, yeah, then they'll tell me the story of whatever's going on. And I make it clear that because I am an HR leader, I'm held to certain laws and compliance. If
Right.
something gets said that I have to further investigate, I have to do that. And I do give that warning,
Right.
not in a way to cause problems, just so they know where the line is.
Right.
Because part
Right.
of the, part of it is what is safe, what can't
Right.
I do, what does it mean, where are the consequences. So, and I leave my door open, call me anytime, text me anytime. I mean, I'm within
Mhm.
work hours, but as far as like, I try to be as approachable as possible. And some folks think that's not the best way to do it, but I do from an HR perspective.
Mhm.
Because the less you tell me, the less I can help, the less I
Mhm.
can provide whatever resource I can give you before we go down a road we can't return.
Mhm.
So I try to do that in meetings, check-ins, coaching sessions with staff, whatever FaceTime I can get with them. That's my mode. And of course, I make it light. We laugh, we joke. I think humor is super important.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm pretty funny in most things, so I think that helps people kind of get the tension of it all, because
Oh,
HR
totally.
is so scary, right?
Yes.
But if I'm making you laugh and we warm it up a little bit, it goes from there. And then, you're kind of just using every opportunity to connect
Yeah.
and building. So I look at it very much like, maybe I didn't go that far today, but there was a block there. We built something, even if
Mhm.
it's two little pieces. And I just want their experience of me to be professional and approachable. And it's pretty much been the case.
Wow. And because I hear you like, allowing people to be vulnerable. You open up the space, your meetings with, okay, pour it all out. And I hope that when leaders listen to this, that you do the same thing. Maybe they don't understand really the benefits of it, but there's a true benefit with allowing people to just pour it out with the sense of safety, so they're
Yes.
not being judged. And part
Mm-hmm.
of the, you may not have solutions in the moment, but
Mm-hmm.
the solution at that moment is at least they're pouring it out. When they say it out loud in front of people, it actually lowers the charge. Like
Yes.
because they're heard. So the
Yes.
charge of it is because if they bottle it up, it gets
Mm-hmm.
comes out, it manifests itself. Like if it's
Oh yeah.
so it's like, okay, let's talk it out loud. Well,
Right.
it's a way to open it up for dialogue, or maybe not, but
Definitely.
at least they felt heard. And so
Definitely.
I hear you doing that. And I mean, I think that they're so lucky to have you as an
Thank
HR
you.
leader. But then I'm fascinated because you do that for everybody else, but for you, it was hard for you to bring the vulnerability into this.
Totally. I mean, I don't get to, let it all out with everyone for obvious
Yeah.
HR
Yeah.
reasons.
Uh-huh.
I'm fortunate that my supervisor does allow, venting, and I can let it out with her.
Oh, good.
I would say I would be lost in this work without my personal therapist, because a lot of things trigger things that have nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
And so to be able to lean on that once a week, where I'm able to say, hey, I'm having a tough day. And sometimes it's work related, sometimes it isn't, but to be able to feel safe in that has been really helpful.
Yeah.
Therapy is like giving you a new toolbox. Like, you
Oh,
have some tools, but you get a brand new set of tools to do different things. So I'm able to come back and be my best self. And I believe in restorative moments, wherever I can have a moment where I can let someone know, hey, what you said and what you did impacted me,
hmm.
and I would appreciate blah blah blah, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
Has been super important in the vulnerability journey. Like,
Hmm.
that's the tough part, when you get hurt.
Hmm. Right.
It's easy to be vulnerable about things that happened in the past, but in the moment at work, someone hurt you, someone
Hmm.
said something that wasn't kind.
Hmm.
It takes vulnerability to turn back and say, that didn't feel good.
Hmm.
I didn't like that, and I wish you'd handled it differently. Right.
Hmm.
And if this comes up in the future, I would appreciate if you did X, Y, and Z. Setting
Hmm.
a boundary around how I want to be treated,
Hmm.
even though I'm HR, and even though I know everyone wants to kind of come and beat you up a little bit, there's still boundaries around this, and I still have limits. I'm still a person. Um,
Right.
that has been the biggest chunk of my vulnerability journey, because before I would just say, it's okay, it's fine, I'm not going to fight, it's not a
Oh,
big deal. And I know it is, it hurt. And
oh,
I get to bring that up in a safe space. And that's
yeah.
exactly what I've done. And I've gotten a lot out of that. It doesn't mean they're going to respond with the I'm sorry's and I wish I had done, you may
Yeah.
not get that. And it's not about that. It's about you advocating for you,
Right.
that
Right.
you have been injured by something someone did. And
Right.
you don't get to be the only one walking around with the pain of that.
Right,
folks need
right,
to know, you know?
right, right. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Wow, congratulations on that too.
Thank
So it's like,
you.
hey, you did this. When you did this, it impacted me like this.
Hmm.
And yeah, I appreciate if you could do something else, or would you,
Right.
yeah, consider doing XYZ, or can we talk about it?
Exactly. Open up the
Yeah,
conversation so that we can learn, you
yeah,
know, because
right,
I don't believe there was ill intent,
right,
right? I just don't think they knew that it would hurt me in the way that, that's how most of these exchanges go, right?
right.
And so it did build a little bit of an understanding about who I am and what I expect in how I'm to be treated. Um,
Mhm.
and that is powerful for a woman in a leadership position. That is powerful for a Black woman. Usually we're on the receiving end of all the bad, and we don't get a chance to voice
Mhm.
the ways that we've been impacted, and we don't get hurt in it. Mostly we get dismissed. So I've been really trying to use this moment, this role, to kind of try these things out, because I know leadership will come with the hard times. So this is a good place
Mhm.
to work on that in a safer space. So yeah.
Yeah, the leadership does. That's when we stretch ourselves, right? In the
Mhm.
hard times.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, I love it. Renisha, that was so powerful. I learned so much, and this conversation
Thank you.
is so important to me. I think that, yeah, I think it's important because we're humans, and especially in our world with so much misinformation, so much inauthenticity, people in
Mhm.
filters and, looking
Oh
the
yeah.
best they can. It's like, no. I mean, just like the authenticity, and I can see that, I could feel that within you. And so I really appreciate that
Thank
this
you so
whole
much. I appreciate it.
conversation.
Thank
And so I'd
you.
like to ask, before we leave and end, what is that one leadership golden takeaway that you'd like the audience to remember?
I would say that who you are is enough, and people are looking for that, right? Whoever you are, whatever you've done, that is why you're at that table. And as much as we think that when we become leaders, we got to mimic and be like those before us or those next to us, that's not the case. Someone is looking up to you, someone is seeing themselves in you. So the more you can demonstrate and uh, project that authentic person, I think it's for the better. And you know, there are ways that that can feel uncomfortable and hard, but the other side of that is knowing that wherever you go as a leader, you did it on your terms. You did it as you.
Mhm.
Mistakes, or wins, whatever that looks like. But no one can really take that from you because it was you the whole time,
Mhm.
and you'll need that as you continue to be a leader, to be
Yeah,
reminded of the things you can do just as you, with all that you have within you.
right. And the whole you, right?
Yes,
That's the thing.
yes,
Whole you, not just like parts of you, because you're going to reflect back and think, why did I only show this side of me? There was more
right,
to me. So it's like
right,
reflecting back, even if it's people shame it or making you feel embarrassed, but at least it's the whole you and it's coming out, because
definitely,
I think there's a lot of strength and growth of accepting parts of us that we
yeah,
want to hide. Uh,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely, yeah.
So be you is
That's
enough.
it. It seems
Love it.
pretty simple.
Yes, it's so hard to do. But
Yeah.
that's why we come back to this podcast, listen to more tips and tricks to help you elevate and grow your leadership. And so thank you, Renisha.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And audience, thank you so much for listening. Until I see you next time, I'm your sister in flow. May prosperity flow to you and through you onto others. See you. Thank you. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Are you curious on how you measure up with your ability to speak in flow? Come grab my free self-assessment at https://speakinflow.com/assessment. And I'll see you on the other side.